We all know that several countries and companies around the world are actually looking at moving away from China, be it for manufacturing or for sourcing, and they're actually moving to other countries, especially in the Asia region. India is one of them. Of course, there are other countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. If you were to take South India specifically, Tamil Nadu is one of the most industrialized states, and it's been for years now. Likewise, Karnataka has an excellent IT ecosystem.
I think in today's global scenario, I don't think any country who is looking at foreign investment can afford to not align its domestic laws. Now, if you look at India, India has always aligned its domestic laws with the international treaties and international law. We don't have to look elsewhere. If you look at the Constitution of India, one of the directive principles of state policy says that you will respect international law and treaties.
Welcome to another episode of Transforming India, the Road to 2047, presented by Mint in partnership with JSA Law. I am your host, Anil Padmanabhan. And today, we are talking about one of the most compelling shifts in the global economic order, the China+1 strategy, which refers to the global shift by companies to diversify their manufacturing and supply chains away from China due to rising costs, trade tensions, and supply chain risks. As businesses look beyond China, South India has emerged as a serious contender in global manufacturing and supply chains. But the road from opportunity to execution is paved with complex regulatory, legal, and strategic decisions. Let's talk about it at length with our two distinguished experts at the forefront of India's legal and policy transformation. Joining us is Varun Sriram, partner at JSA Law, with nearly 2 decades of experience across M&A, fund structuring, and private client practice. Varun played a key role in expanding JSA's presence in South India through a successful merger. He advises leading promoter families, HNIs, and tech companies on their strategic, transactional, and estate planning needs and leads high-value deals across sectors from real estate to e-commerce. We also have with us Vinod Kumar, partner at JSA, who has over 2.5 decades of experience in complex dispute resolutions and public law matters. He regularly appears before various forums and represents clients in arbitration across varied sectors, both domestic and international. Vinod also has deep expertise in both domestic and international arbitration across sectors like ports, gas, and power. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Hi,
Thanks, Anil.
hi, Anil.
Thanks.
So, Varun, if I can begin with you, what makes South India well positioned to benefit from this shift, and what specific policies or incentives should be introduced to attract manufacturing investments in sectors like electronics, autos, and renewable energy?
So, Anil, firstly, I think these are very interesting times. We are seeing a lot of tariff issues going on globally, and that's kind of fueled a lot more to the China+1 strategy. I think almost every day there is new news that's coming out. Is South India well poised for this? Certainly, yes. We all know that several countries and companies around the world are actually looking at moving away from China, be it for manufacturing or for sourcing, and they're actually moving to other countries, especially in the Asia region. India is one of them. Of course, there are other countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, who are also competing with India to get a lot of these manufacturing facilities into their countries. Now, if you were to take South India specifically, say for instance Tamil Nadu is one of the most industrialized states, and it's been for years now. You have some fantastic manufacturing hubs, be it in Chennai, be it in Coimbatore or Hosur. Likewise, Karnataka has an excellent IT ecosystem. It has fantastic electronic parks, and it gives a lot of importance to aerospace as well. Take Andhra and Telangana. Of late, there's been a lot of interest from GCCs, right? Setting up of GCCs in those two jurisdictions. And of course, pharma units. We can't forget that. So these states have been doing really well over the last decade or more. These states also created a lot of niche for themselves with respect to certain sectors. So take it auto components, pharma, solar panel manufacturing, ITES, GCC. So there is a lot of skill set that's available. There is high engineering talent, and needless to say that it's all English-speaking population, and therefore there is a lot of comfort for companies to set up, expand, or enter into joint venture collaborations with South Indian companies. Of course, one must not also forget that the cultural fitment also takes a lot of importance. So if you were to take a lot of Asian companies, be it Japanese or South Korean companies, the cultural fitment that they find amongst South Indian promoter families to companies set up here is far greater. And therefore, all this kind of adds to the advantages that South India and South Indian companies really have. Now, insofar as policies or incentives that's concerned, especially you had mentioned about automotive, renewable energy, and electronic space. While I think there could be more improvements, more policies that are put in play, we should not forget that possibly from 2014 or 15 onwards, Make in India mission has been big. It got reinvented in a sense from 2020 or COVID onwards as self-reliant policies and mission. So have there been a lot of incentives and policies over the last 10, 15 years? Yes, certainly yes. And can there be more such policies, incentives, especially in these sectors? I think the state governments are certainly introducing those. There have been guidelines given through DPIIT or for that matter Niti Aayog. The need for plug-and-play infrastructures are certainly need of the hour. Talent development policies should possibly be given more importance. There should be initiatives with private universities, with industry bodies to kind of develop these. So I think there could be a lot more measures that are taken, but I would certainly focus on be it issues to do with infrastructure with respect to plug-and-play structures, talent development, so which means enhanced skill development and not necessarily just restricting it to engineering talent. So these are some of the policies that possibly could be looked at.
It's nice because you say the opportunity exists and it's actually an excellent fit, South India, but there are challenges. So Vinod, if I can turn to you. Some of the challenges are very obvious, but some stand out too. So land acquisition challenges, rigid labor laws, and congested logistics are still persistent obstacles in South India in their efforts for a manufacturing push. What are some of the policy strategies that could address these issues in a coordinated manner across states so India does not lose out to a Vietnam or an Indonesia?
Thanks, Anil. Some of the issues that you speak about, it's not unique to India or South India. It's like learning to cook. If I want to learn to cook, I will burn my fingers, I will chop my fingers maybe. But then, so it's if a company wants to set up a manufacturing facility, irrespective of whether it is India or any other country, you are going to have problem with land acquisition. You are going to have labor issues because this is a new territory, new region, which you are not familiar with. Now, having said that, it is a similar situation in India or South India for that matter. Not just for a foreign investor, even for an Indian company, unless they own a large parcel of land, for setting up a manufacturing facility, you need a sizable land. And you have to go through that process, therefore delays are inherent. I think which is where the industrial parks which have been set up by the government of all the state governments, which really help, and they're a very viable option to these companies, because what they do is you have something ready there. You don't have to acquire land, you don't have to convert land. You just go to the government, make your application, get it allotted, and then you start. Your approvals are, it's a single window system. Your approvals are in place, you start manufacturing. Now that is in terms of the acquisition of land is concerned. Now talking about labor laws, yes, it is outdated. It is rigid. As an employer, you have to do a lot of paper filling, a lot of compliances to be done. It's time consuming. It's not easy. Now, if I'm not wrong, there are probably more than 30 labor legislations when as an employer you sit and you start doing it. Now the good news is that there is a labor code which should come out anytime, where they have consolidated these various legislations into 4 buckets. There are 4 codes which are going to be there. And the hope is that it will streamline, it will simplify. And from a policy perspective, whether it is a central government's labor policy compliance or the state government compliance, is I think what is required is some form of technology coming in where the employer can use technology, maybe self-certify, and of course subject to audits. Now the third point which you are talking about is logistical challenges. Now I was reading somewhere in one of the reports, it says that the logistics cost in India constitutes 14 to 18% of our GDP. Now, if you look at developed countries, it's somewhere between 8 to 10%. So it's not an ideal situation to be in. But then the good news is, when the World Bank issued its report on the logistics indexing, India had moved from 44th position to the 38th position. Now, if you look at the policies of both the center as well as state governments, there is enough being done. In fact, each of the South Indian states have come out with their individual policy on logistics. There are expansions of road infrastructure that is happening. There is logistics parks which are being developed. There is a huge push for using technology to track logistics and all that. And I think the biggest strength for South Indian states is the coastal region that we have, the ports that we have. If you look at the whole of South India, there may be maybe more than 20 ports which are capable of handling large cargo, large container vessels. And I think that is a really important feature for any manufacturer who looks at setting up, because he is going to import and export. I think that is what is critical. And as a multi-state cooperation which you're talking about, I think that is a good idea. I think states should look at coming together and coming out with joint policies, which will then help the manufacturing facilities.
So nice. So you're saying basically the ecosystem is falling in place, but it can be accelerated if you coordinate it among states.
Certainly. It's not as bad as it was a few years back. Yeah.
So, Varun, I want to put the spotlight on another aspect, which is, you mentioned it in passing, your opening remarks. The industrial growth in the South is built on the legacy of family-owned businesses. So, can these firms evolve, especially with respect to their governance and capital structures, to scale internationally and align with global expectations around a China+1?
Historically, yes, the industrial growth here, this region, has been built on family businesses. So even today, if you take some of the large companies, listed companies in the south of India, many of them continue to be promoter controlled. Is there a shift from that being promoter controlled to professionally controlled or professionally driven? Not overnight. We have seen steady changes over a period of time, and not again necessarily for a China+1 strategy, because these changes have been going on for over a decade now. The trend generally is that when it comes to South Indian promoter groups, they do take their time in testing international models, in testing how best any cultural change, leadership change will impact their DNA per se. Because all said and done, these South Indian groups, promoter groups, do attract international investments, partnerships from across the world, even for the reason that they are promoter driven, promoter controlled, and there is a promoter angle to it. So we shouldn't really forget that. Having said that, when it really comes to corporate governance and capital structures, are there changes? Are these groups exploring a variety of options? Certainly, yes. I think they are trying to strike a balance between what really works for their ecosystem and what really works for certain global investors. And certainly, over a period of time, there have been changes to board structures, committee structures. What has been happening and what will tend to happen is that there will be more independent expert directors who will be part of the board structures. This kind of increases board credibility. There will be specialized committees that will get set up. And as companies do grow, they do this. So that monitoring and implementation of certain policies, certain decisions are superior to a board completely taking charge of every piecemeal activity within a company. The kind of information, the quality of information that is given by the board to its stakeholders, there is room for improvement. The ability for them to give certain kind of MIS on a periodical basis makes a lot of difference again. I think these are all some corporate governance gold standards. And as far as capital structure is concerned, now, again, like I told you, this region, the ability to move to newer capital structures, the groups do test before they kind of move in and implement. Having said that, yes, there have been certain changes to capital structures. I think large groups have started understanding that it is important not just to look at and secure their financial interest and have financial investors on their cap table, but to really have strategic players who bring in more value than expecting a return of investment, to open up networks globally. So all this is something that is acknowledged, and there will be a trend that will move even to take money from a PE fund to see whether that PE fund is a mere financial investor or are they bringing more to the table. I think this has been happening and will continue to certainly happen. So yes, have we seen trends? Yes, and are we going to notice a lot more of capital structure or corporate governance changes? And possibly from a China+1 angle, yes, certainly yes.
So basically, it's a work in progress.
I would think so. And like I mentioned, the groups largely will try, test, and see what really works around the world and what really works for them, given that they certainly don't want to lose their DNA. So for instance, if you were to see, a lot of groups around the world are moving away from promoter leadership to professional leadership, professional CEOs, CFOs. While that trend is there in the South Indian group companies also, but they do try and strike a balance. It's not that overnight they are trying to move away all the family members from leadership and have external players come in. They try and have both. So it's a hybrid system, and sometimes it does work well.
See, Vinod, if I may turn to you and draw your attention to the fact that inefficient contract enforcement and arbitration delays are usually cited as the major pain points for businesses operating in India in general. In your experience, how have these issues been addressed in the recent past, and what more can be done to enhance legal certainty, especially in cross-border transactions?
I think that's a reality which we are not proud of. It's like the IPL league table. We are like the CSK, the enforcement of contracts, at least this year. So we are the last there. And when the World Bank came out with its report, I think it was in 2000, I think out of 190 countries, India was ranked 163rd or 168th, something like that, in enforcement of contracts. Whereas for ease of doing business, India was way up, 63 or something. So just imagine if enforcement of contract was better, we would have probably ranked higher in the ease of doing business. Now, before I go into what are the recent steps that have been taken and how things can be changed, I think what is important, at least that's what I feel, is if we look at why we are here today, right? So look back 30, 35 years, and I say that because, that's when the economic liberalization happened, 1991 is when we opened up. Now, for almost 20 years, there was hardly any legislations, newer legislations or changes introduced in law to keep pace with the economic liberalization. And that, I think, has created a huge gap. Now, the only probably noteworthy legislation which came during that period was in 1996, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. Apart from that, there may not be too many legislations which came close to almost about a decade earlier. So it's from 2013 onwards, you will see that there was some new legislations which were brought. Now, we had the amendment to the Specific Relief Act, which made specific enforcement of contract a mandatory rule than the discretionary one which was there earlier. The Commercial Courts Act were introduced, the legislation was brought about, commercial courts have been set up across the country. There has been multiple amendments to the Arbitration Act, which has set time limits for arbitrations to conclude. There have been the Companies Act, the new Companies Act have come. Therefore, in the last 10, 12 years, we have seen several legislations. Now, the question is it enough to just have legislations? Because what we are looking at is an ecosystem where there is a law and there is a judicial system. Now, if we were to talk about how it can be improved, I think we need one more session for that. But to keep it simple, I'll just say two things. I think first one is the judge to population ratio. I think India's is one of the lowest among various countries. And I think something seriously needs to be done quickly to improve that. Because if you have one judge who is overloaded with work, there is no way you are going to find a situation where you are going to dispose of more cases, because you're looking at enforcement of contract. Cases have to move quickly, come to a conclusion. There, of course, there are vacancies to be filled in. I'm not just talking about vacancies, existing vacancies. I'm saying we will need more judges, therefore more infrastructure towards courts. Now, that's talking about the first aspect. Now, the second is, what we are trying to do is we are using a system which has been there for centuries, more than a century, the judicial system, if you look at it, and you're trying to introduce something new into it. It has not worked. Let's be honest, let's be frank, it's not worked. You may have brought in the Commercial Courts Act, but except barring a few high courts which have dedicated judges who take up commercial matters, in some high courts there are no dedicated judges, while on paper it is there. The same is the situation with the lower courts. Commercial courts are identified and designated in each district. But then if you go to that court, the poor judge is taking up all kinds of cases, criminal cases, other civil cases, property disputes, and commercial cases. You need to change this. You need to have an entirely parallel system which does only commercial matters. Now, speaking of arbitration delays, yes, there has been arbitration delays, but I think the situation has improved drastically after 2015, because in 2015, an amendment was introduced which said that there should be a time-bound disposal. Of course, it is subject to extension. But then thereafter, we have seen that there is an improvement. But it can be much better, because there are still some cases where it goes into a situation where the timeline is over, but parties are extending the timeline, parties are going to court, which is not an ideal situation. The Act says 18 months, but then you find cases going for 3 years. Now, what needs to be done? I think there again, it's not just the law. It is the players who are involved. It is the users. It is the judges or the arbitrators. I won't say judges, but arbitrators who control the whole proceedings in an arbitration. They have to be stricter. They have to be clearer. They should not treat this as just another court proceedings. They have to treat it as a proceeding which has to be concluded quickly. I think we are on the right path. It's a work in progress. It's a slow one, but I think we will reach there. But to do that quickly, I think we need to make these changes quickly.
That's interesting, Vinod, because what you're saying, put it very simply, is that all stakeholders need to rise to the occasion. Unless and until they do that, the judicial system is not going to be up to par, right?
Yeah, like we say, we need both hands to clap, right? So.
Well said. So, Varun, if I may turn to you, states like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana are competing with FDI, but the fragmented policy confuses investors. So, do you see the scope for a national framework that harmonizes incentives and reduces regulatory asymmetry across states?
So that's a very important policy question. You've asked if national framework can harmonize incentives and reduce regulatory asymmetry among states. Well, the answer is yes, there is scope, but any such framework will have to be carefully crafted. There are sensitivities. At present, India has fragmented investment schemes and policies. States have the power to initiate various schemes, initiatives, and policies. They have their own rules with respect to land allotment or tax subsidies, capital subsidies. So, is it something that's possible? Yes, but one will have to really see how this can be steered. So, if you actually see that there are states which actually offer different grants and different incentives, this often confuses investors, especially foreign investors, to understand which state they should set up, which state they should look at as expanding their operations. In the long run, they're not very clear which would be most apt for them, right? So now this is also creating a lot of bidding war among states. And we've seen in the past about a decade or so, this has also happened when large MNCs have tried to come into India and set up. We've actually had states offer different schemes and incentives to kind of lure them. And this has actually gone out as a bidding war. We've seen it in front pages, right? Now, this may not also be good for the states because some of these grants that they're willing to give may actually not be sustainable in the long run. So, is it beneficial to actually have a national framework? Yes. Is it that easy? Maybe not. But what could be done? The central government could always think of giving the right kind of guidances through a DPIIT or an Niti Aayog. These could be some kind of framework and policies that the states look at for framing incentives. So there could be possibly understanding of what is desirable, what kind of incentives, what are the upper ceiling limits, for instance, so that you don't really have disadvantages among states. There could be possibly model industrial policy codes that could be introduced. There could also be industrial competitiveness index, which doesn't really measure these states only on the basis of incentives that they're offering, but on a variety of other issues, be it the logistical framework to the labor talent and policies that is being introduced. So these are all some of the measures that possibly could, be introduced to see how you harmonize incentive schemes.
So basically create national guardrails within which all the states can operate.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap up, Vinod, I wanted to take you back to a comment you made in the previous question, was that you said the Indian legal system will have to play catch up quickly at that. In that context, I want to ask you that to succeed globally, Indian legal system will therefore have to match international standards, right? So how important is it then for India to align its laws with international conventions and trade laws to support cross-border trade, financing and protecting investors?
I think in today's global scenario, I don't think any country who is looking at foreign investment can afford to not align its domestic laws with foreign laws. You won't have any investors. Now, if you look at India, India has always aligned its domestic laws with the international treaties and international law. You don't have to look elsewhere. If you look at the Constitution of India, one of the directive principles of state policy says that you will respect international law and treaties. Now, if you look at the arbitration law, which came in 1996 and replaced the 1940 Act. That is based on the UNCITRAL model law. The recent, when I say recent, couple of years back, the mediation law which was introduced, that is again based on the UNCITRAL model law. Therefore, it has been a practice in India to follow international conventions, international trade laws, so that the laws are always aligned. And if you look at the, for example, enforcement of arbitration awards, I mean, India has been a party to the New York Convention on Enforcement of Foreign Awards since 1958. So it's just 10, 11 years into independence. And even the courts, if you look at judgments, Indian judgments, you will often find, especially in the Supreme Court and High Court judgments, when dealing with commercial matters and contractual matters, you will invariably find the courts citing foreign judgments and what is the legal position outside India. This is definitely in an attempt to ensure that it is all aligned together. Of course, it helps that the Indian contract law, which is the fundamental commercial law in India, is based on the common law we have inherited from the British. It's been on from 1872. But then that shows that the judiciary is not saying that, okay, it's been 75 years, we have moved on and we'll do our own stuff. Even now we look at outside India what's happening, align the laws. So therefore, both from a legislative perspective as well as a judicial perspective, I think the ecosystem, in fact, encourages and kind of promotes alignment of Indian law with what is happening, the reality of the international law. So therefore, I don't think we are lacking there. The catch-up that I was talking about is improving efficiency, cutting down delays. I think that's an entirely different aspect. But as far as aligning our laws, I think we are right there among one of the best countries. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Vinod, for clarifying. And also thank you both for being on the show today.
Thanks, Anil. It's been a pleasure to be part of this event.
Thanks a lot, Anil. It's been very insightful.
Well, with that, we have come to the end of yet another insightful episode of Transforming India, the Road to 2047. From industrial strategy to dispute resolution and state-center coordination to legal reform, it's clear that policy and law must move in lockstep if South India is to truly seize the China+1 moment. Until next time, keep innovating, keep moving forward. This is your host, Anil Padmanabhan, signing off.